Right, as we said, European football expert Andy Brassell joins us now to look ahead to this week's Champions League games. Andy, great to see you. Thank you for joining us this morning. Let's start with Dortmund against Newcastle. It was a brilliant start, wasn't it, in the group for Newcastle. They picked up a point at Milan. They thrashed PSG, but then lost at home to Dortmund last time out. Do they realistically need to get a result tonight?
A point would keep them well in it, Hannah. I think that's pretty clear. And I think going there thinking that we need to win would be the wrong way about it, I think, because a point would be really handy for them. You know, they both still have to play PSG, which will be difficult for both Newcastle and Dortmund. And even if they did lose that last game at St James's Park, what they should know from those first three games, after a lot of people suggested they would find it really hard in this group when the draw was initially made, there's nothing to fear in this group. I think Dortmund did just about deserve to win at St James's Park, but they can look back at the game against PSG as well. Look, everyone in this group knows what they're about now. And of course, Dortmund had a very, very difficult time at the weekend against Bayern, which will have knocked their confidence, having had an unbeaten start to the season. And in those first two group games, not only did Dortmund not score, they didn't look like scoring. So they're not a team that's going to absolutely pepper you. They're not a team like they did in the era of Jurgen Klopp that's going to play with any great pace or anything like that. So I think Newcastle can go there and feel pretty good about themselves.
Well, Manchester City, they've got young boys tonight. They can qualify for the last 16. How surprised would you be if Manchester City don't do it tonight?
Very, Tom. I think that's unreasonable to say that. Especially with, as Pep Guardiola was saying, rotating the team. You've got a whole load of other great players who want to come in and prove they're worth a place in the 11. So that's something that's hard on young boys. They did go top of the Swiss League at the weekend, as you would expect them eventually to do to close out the championship, obviously an early stage. But there's some interesting stuff going on with young boys at the moment. They are very good at home, and you have to underline that. And they've made it difficult for some really good teams there down the years. But having said that, they've got this interesting off-field wrangle at the moment, a legal action between their defender Loris Benito and his previous club, Bordeaux. So that's kind of lingering in the background as well. I'm sure they'll put that out of their minds when it all starts. But yeah, of course, City strong favourites.
Celtic, meanwhile, they travel to Madrid to face a somewhat out of form Atletico side. Do you think that Celtic could perhaps grab something from this one?
Well, I think, Hannah, we have to say that even though they went down at Las Palmas at the weekend, Atletico have been pretty good this season. I think where Celtic have to look for the pressure point is the fact that Atletico have to prove themselves all again in the Champions League. You know, like we have this image of Dortmund under Klopp and a little bit Thomas Tuchel, a sort of swashbuckling side going back sort of 5, 6, 7, 8 years or whatever. We still have that image of Atletico grinding out results and getting to the finals in 2014 and 2016. They cannot defend like that anymore. They're letting a lot of cheap goals, and they did so again at the weekend. And what it underlined at the weekend as well is when Antoine Griezmann isn't at it, they're not at it as well, because he came off after an hour. It looked as if he might have been carrying an injury, but he is expected to start tonight. And just how fit he is massively important to how they do. But look, Celtic, as you said before, they need to go there and really try and get a win realistically. But having said that, the sort of goals that Atletico can see, particularly from set pieces nowadays, they have to go and have a go. And there's a lot of talk in Spain this morning about Luis Palma and how he's one who sort of slipped through the net and Aris picked him up and Celtic have platformed him. So a lot of interest in him as well, especially after that first leg.
So that's tonight's games, but tomorrow Manchester United, they're in action against Copenhagen. How do you see that one going? Because there's no doubt there is huge pressure on Manchester United to get the win tomorrow.
Well, there is huge pressure on United, Tom, and I think Copenhagen, we talked about young boys being tough at home, but double that for Copenhagen. And there's a lot of experience in that team as well. And we saw that they could get a United in that first game. I know we kind of tend to think about that game through the prism of the big moments, so the Maguire goal and the Onana save. But if that Jordan Larson penalty had gone in, I don't think anyone could say that Copenhagen had stolen the result. So I think if you go back to Copenhagen's last game as well in the Champions League, they made it really difficult for Bayern. They led them for a bit. Not many teams have made it that difficult for Bayern this season. So, look, United are going to have to fight really hard if they're going to get the result they want there.
Arsenal tomorrow host Sevilla off the back of that fairly disappointing and somewhat controversial defeat to Newcastle. I mean, the conversation around that match has rumbled on. How important is it that they put that to one side, put that behind them and focus on this match?
Oh, it's massively important, but I back them to do that, absolutely. I looked at this group before and I thought despite the size of the names, and particularly, obviously, PSV and former winners and Sevilla, serial winners of the Europa League, if you look at the current nick of all of them, Arsenal should be winning most, if not all, of the games in that group. Now, it was understandable they got punked at Lens because the atmosphere there is absolutely incredible. They were so much better than PSV in the opening game. I was at that, and I think that the shock from the Emirates crowd of, not only were Arsenal back in the Champions League, but it turned out it was really easy, was something. They did the hard part in Sevilla, getting the win in No Beyond, because again, that's really, really tough. But Sevilla are not the team that they were a couple of years ago. I think it's fair to say it's a team that's aged quite badly. And when I think you look at the dynamism of Arsenal, the fact that it is quite an old Sevilla team, I think plays into their hands quite nicely.
England fans certainly getting excited about this one, that the race for the European Golden Boot could be between, OK, understandably, Harry Kane, but also Jude Bellingham. How impressive have you been with both of them so far this season?
Well, a lot. Who couldn't be, Tom? I think with Jude Bellingham, we saw at the weekend when Real Madrid only drew with Rayo. We talked about Griezmann not being on it and Atletico not being on it. I think you can say the same for Bellingham and Real Madrid. They were kind of waiting for him to do something special. He wasn't quite able to. It was a 0-0 draw and they ended up not going back to the top of the table, with Girona still the leaders, remarkably, in La Liga. But I think they're making the most of the fact that they don't have a centre forward at the moment. So Bellingham gets that little bit of extra freedom to take up goal scoring positions. I wouldn't expect that to last forever, because if they bring in Mbappe next season or whatever top quality striker they want to bring in, and they will bring in an elite level striker, whether it's Mbappe or someone else, then maybe Bellingham starts going back to normal man figures. I don't think Harry Kane's going back to normal man figures anytime in the near future. Everyone's been so impressed with him at Bayern. The way he's added to the team on and off the pitch, in the dressing room, he's a huge figure already. And I don't think there's a player and team in the world who are more suited to each other. I think we've seen that in the first little while of Kane being in Munich, that he suits them perfectly and they suit him perfectly as well. I mean, obviously, this is a record-breaking start. No one scored 15 in the first 10 games in the Bundesliga before. And if you bear in mind that the record for a Bundesliga season is 41. That was Gerd Müller's record of 40, broken by Robert Lewandowski 2.5 years ago. If Kane continues at current pace, he gets 51. Now, this is what was considered one of the unbreakable records of German football, the Gerd Müller one. And Lewandowski finally got it over the line. You're thinking, OK, it will last at least for another 30, 40 years. It might last for 3 years at this rate. But the goals don't even tell the half of what Kane has done for Bayern so far. And Galatasaray are going to find it hard to keep him out.
Andy, always great to speak to you. Big week in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.